Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Defiant Dawn, watching the blue and brown planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442c looked peaceful from space, but the readings from their sensors told a different story. The planet should have been quiet, with only a small mining operation according to the galactic records. Instead, their instruments showed massive industrial activity and thousands of life signs concentrated in specific areas. Sarah had been exploring space for 15 years. She knew what normal mining operations looked like, and this was not normal. The energy signatures were too big, the heat patterns too concentrated, and there were far too many ships coming and going from the planet's surface. Lieutenant Kim, scan those facilities again, Sarah ordered. Something's not right here. Lieutenant David Kim worked at his console, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. The young officer had joined her crew 6 months ago, fresh from the academy on Earth. He was eager and smart, but he had never seen anything like what their sensors were picking up. Captain, I'm reading over 50,000 life signs in what appears to be enclosed compounds, Kim reported. The structures look like, well, they look like prison camps, ma'am. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The Terran Federation had spread across 73 star systems in the past 2 centuries, and they had only one law that applied everywhere humans went. No sentient being could be enslaved, trafficked, or held against their will. It was the one rule that every human colony, every human ship, and every human citizen was bound to follow and protect. The law had come from humanity's own dark history. Earth had seen enough slavery, enough suffering, enough people treated like property. When humans finally reached the stars, they had made a promise. Never again would they allow any thinking being to be bought, sold, or owned by another. Take us into a closer orbit, Sarah commanded. But keep us hidden behind that moon. I want detailed scans of those facilities. The Defiant Dawn moved silently through space, using the small moon's gravity to mask their approach. Sarah's crew worked quietly, gathering data and images from the planet below. What they found made Sarah's blood run cold. The compounds were definitely prison camps. Thousands of beings from dozens of different species were being held in terrible conditions. The buildings were overcrowded, the sanitation was poor, and armed guards patrolled the perimeters. Worse, the scans showed that many of the prisoners were humans. Captain, Kim said quietly, I'm picking up work details being moved from the camps to the mining sites. They're chained together, ma'am. This is definitely slavery. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. In all her years of exploration, she had never encountered anything like this. She had heard stories, of course. There were always rumors of illegal slave operations in the outer systems, far from the major trade routes and government patrols. But to find it happening on this scale with humans among the victims was shocking. Who's running this operation? Sarah asked. Her communications officer, Ensign Maria Santos, checked the ship registries and planetary records. According to the official files, this is a Zephyrian syndicate mining operation. They have legal permits from the local sector government. Sarah knew about the Zephyrians. They were a powerful alien species that controlled dozens of star systems and had huge influence in galactic politics. They were known for their business skills and their ability to make deals with anyone. What she was seeing now explained how they had become so wealthy so quickly. Ma'am, we need to contact Terran Command immediately, Lieutenant Kim said. This is a clear violation of human law. Sarah nodded, but before she could give the order, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. 3 large Zephyrian warships had appeared from behind the planet, moving fast toward their position. They've detected us, Santos reported. They're demanding we leave the system immediately. Open a channel, Sarah ordered. The main screen showed a Zephyrian officer. The alien's scaled face showed no emotion as it spoke in perfect English. Human vessel, you are in restricted space. Depart immediately or face the consequences. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation vessel Defiant Dawn, Sarah replied firmly. We have detected illegal slavery operations on the planet below. This is a violation of human law and we demand immediate access to investigate. The Zephyrian's eyes narrowed. You have no authority here, human. This is Zephyrian space operating under legal permits. Leave now. Those are human citizens being held against their will, Sarah said, her voice getting harder. The Terran Federation has the right to protect its people anywhere in the galaxy. You have 30 seconds to change course, the Zephyrian replied. After that, we will consider you hostile. Sarah looked at her crew. The Defiant Dawn was an exploration ship, not a warship. They had defensive shields and some weapons, but nothing that could match 3 Zephyrian battlecruisers. But she also knew her duty. The law was clear and the evidence was overwhelming. "Record everything we've found," Sarah ordered. "Send it to our probe and launch it toward the nearest Terran outpost. Make sure the data gets home." "Captain, they're powering weapons," Kim warned. "Do it now," Sarah said. The small probe launched from the ship, accelerating quickly toward the edge of the system. It would take weeks to reach the nearest human outpost, but the data would eventually get to Earth. The evidence of what was happening here would not die with them. "Human ship, you have violated our warning," the Zephyrian said. "Prepare to be destroyed." The 3 warships opened fire. The Defiant Dawn's shields flared as energy beams struck them. Sarah's ship shook violently as the defensive system struggled against the massive firepower. "Return fire," Sarah ordered, even though she knew it was hopeless. The exploration ship's small weapons did little damage to the heavily armored Zephyrian vessels. The enemy ships spread out, surrounding the human vessel and continuing their attack. The Defiant Dawn's shields began to fail. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Kim reported. "We're losing life support in sections 4 through 7. "Emergency power to shields," Sarah commanded, but she knew they only had minutes left. The ship shook again as another volley hit them. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the lights flickered. Sarah could smell smoke in the air and hear the sound of metal being torn apart. "Captain, the engines are failing," Santos called out. "We're dead in space." The Zephyrian ships moved closer, their weapons still trained on the crippled human vessel. The lead ship sent another message. "Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your immediate destruction." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. They were young, dedicated people who had joined the exploration service to see the galaxy and help make it a better place. Now they were about to become prisoners, or worse, because they had tried to do the right thing. "All hands, this is the captain," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "Prepare for boarding. Destroy all sensitive data and equipment. Remember your training, remember your duty, and remember that the truth about what we found here must reach Earth." The Zephyrian boarding parties cut through the hull with energy torches. Armed soldiers in battle armor moved through the ship, rounding up the crew. Sarah and her officers were taken to the bridge and forced to their knees. The Zephyrian commander who entered the bridge was different from the one on the screen. This one was older, with more scars and a harder look in his eyes. He examined the destroyed equipment and the empty data cores with obvious displeasure. "Where is your data on our operations?" he demanded. "What operations?" Sarah replied. "We detected some unusual energy readings and came to investigate. We found nothing of interest." The commander struck her across the face with the back of his hand. The blow was hard enough to split her lip and make her ears ring. "Do not lie to me, human. We know you scanned our facilities. Where is the data?" "There is no data," Sarah said, spitting blood. "You destroyed our computers when you attacked us." The commander studied her for a long moment, then gestured to his soldiers. "Take them to the planet. Put them with the other workers. Perhaps sometime in the camps will make them more cooperative." Sarah and her crew were loaded onto a transport ship and taken down to the planet's surface. The journey gave her time to see more of the operation from above. The scale was incredible. There were dozens of camps, hundreds of mining sites, and thousands of ships moving back and forth between the planet and space. The transport landed at one of the larger camps, and Sarah got her first close look at the horror the Zephyrians had created. The buildings were crude metal structures, overcrowded and poorly maintained. Armed guards walked the perimeters, and high-energy fences kept the prisoners inside. The camp commander, another Zephyrian, looked at the new arrivals with interest. "Ah, the troublesome humans. I have special accommodations for you." Sarah and her crew were separated from each other and thrown into different sections of the camp. Sarah found herself in a barracks building with 50 other prisoners from a dozen different species. The conditions were terrible. The building was hot, overcrowded, and dirty. There was barely enough food and water for everyone, and medical care was non-existent. But what shocked Sarah the most was meeting the other humans in the camp. There were hundreds of them, taken from colonies and ships across human space. Some had been prisoners for years, working in the mines and factories while their families back home believed they were dead or missing. An older human man named Robert Chen, no relation despite the shared name, had been in the camp for 3 years. He had been the captain of a merchant vessel that had been attacked and captured while carrying supplies to a frontier colony. "They've been doing this for decades," Robert told Sarah quietly as they sat in the barracks after their first day of forced labor in the mines. "Taking people from the outer colonies where no one will notice right away. The Zephyrians sell us to other species because humans can work in almost any environment." "How many camps are there?" Sarah asked. "On this planet alone? Maybe 20, but they have operations across dozens of systems, thousands of camps, millions of prisoners. It's the biggest slave operation in the galaxy, and it's been growing every year." Sarah felt sick. The law that humanity held most sacred was being violated on a massive scale, and no one back home even knew it was happening. The Zephyrians had been careful, taking people from places where they wouldn't be missed immediately, bribing local officials to look the other way, and using their political influence to keep major governments from investigating. "We have to get word out," Sarah said. "Earth has to know what's happening here." Robert shook his head sadly. "How? We're trapped here, and even if we could escape, the Zephyrians own the local governments. No one will listen to escaped prisoners with no proof." But Sarah refused to give up hope. Somewhere out there, her probe was still traveling toward human space, carrying the evidence of what the Zephyrians were doing. The data would reach Earth eventually, and when it did, the response would be swift and terrible. The Terran Federation had only one law, but it was a law written in the blood and suffering of Earth's history. Humanity had learned the hard way what happened when people were treated as property, and they had sworn never to let it happen again. The Zephyrians had broken that law. They had taken human citizens, enslaved them, and sold them like animals. They had built an empire on the suffering of millions of sentient beings, including Sarah's own people. As Sarah lay on the hard floor of the barracks, listening to the quiet sobs of prisoners around her, she made a promise. Somehow, some way, the truth would reach Earth. And when it did, the Zephyrians would learn that there was a price to pay for breaking humanity's sacred law. The price would be paid in blood. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in his office at Terra Prime, staring at the report on his desk. The probe from the Defiant Dawn had finally reached human space after 6 weeks of travel. The data it carried was horrifying beyond belief. Marcus had served in the Terran Navy for 35 years. He had fought pirates, explored unknown systems, and helped establish colonies on distant worlds. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was reading now. The evidence was overwhelming. Detailed scans, photographs, and sensor readings showed massive slave operations across multiple star systems. Hundreds of thousands of beings from dozens of species were being held in brutal conditions, forced to work in mines and factories, and among them were thousands of humans. "Sir," his aide, Commander Lisa Park, entered the office. "We've received more information from our intelligence networks. 3 more ships have gone missing in the outer systems, all in areas where we now know the Zephyrians operate." Marcus nodded grimly. The pattern was becoming clear. For years, the Zephyrians had been systematically capturing ships and raiding colonies in remote areas. They had been careful to target places where people wouldn't be missed immediately, where local authorities could be bribed or intimidated into silence. "What's the status of diplomatic contact?" Marcus asked. "Ambassador Johnson made formal inquiries yesterday," Park replied. "The Zephyrian government denies any knowledge of slave operations. They claim the Defiant Dawn was destroyed for violating their territorial boundaries and refusing to leave when ordered." Marcus felt his anger rising. The Zephyrians weren't just operating slave camps. They were lying about it, using their diplomatic status to cover up their crimes. They thought they could hide behind legal technicalities and political influence. "Get me a secure line to Admiral Chen at Fleet Command," Marcus ordered. 5 minutes later, Marcus was speaking directly to the head of the Terran Navy. Admiral Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Captain Sarah Chen, listened carefully as Marcus briefed her on the situation. "The evidence is undeniable," Marcus concluded. "The Zephyrians have been operating the largest slave network in known space. They've captured thousands of our people and are holding them in conditions that violate every principle of civilized behavior." "I understand your anger, Marcus," Admiral Chen replied, "but we have to be careful here. The Zephyrian Syndicate is one of the most powerful political entities in this sector. They have influence with the Galactic Trade Council, the Interspecies Defense Alliance, and dozens of other organizations. If we move against them without absolute proof—" "We have absolute proof," Marcus interrupted. The data from the Defiant Dawn is completely reliable. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew died trying to get this information to us. The Zephyrians are claiming the data is fake, Admiral Chen said. They say it's part of a human conspiracy to damage their reputation and steal their mining rights. Some of the other major powers are starting to believe them. Marcus stared at the wall of his office where portraits of famous naval officers looked down at him. These were men and women who had fought to protect human dignity and freedom across the galaxy. They would never have tolerated what was happening now. What are our options? Marcus asked. The Senate is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation, Admiral Chen replied. But the political advisors are recommending economic sanctions rather than military action. They're afraid that a war with the Zephyrians could destabilize the entire sector. Marcus felt his heart sink. Economic sanctions would do nothing to help the people suffering in those camps right now. While politicians argued and diplomats made speeches, thousands of humans would continue to suffer as slaves. The next day, Marcus sat in the Senate gallery and watched as Earth's leaders debated the fate of their captured citizens. Senator Williams from the Colonial Committee stood at the podium, making the case for a military response. The evidence is clear, Senator Williams declared. Our people are being held as slaves in violation of our most fundamental law. We have a moral obligation to rescue them and punish those responsible. But Senator Harrison from the Trade Committee disagreed. Military action against the Zephyrian Syndicate would be an act of war, he argued. It could lead to a conflict that spreads across dozens of star systems. The economic damage alone could set back human expansion by generations. Other senators voiced their concerns. The Zephyrians had powerful allies. Their trade network supplied critical resources to human colonies. A war could mean shortages of food, medicine, and industrial materials for millions of people. Marcus watched the debate with growing disgust. These politicians were talking about trade routes and economic stability, while human beings were being tortured and worked to death in alien slave camps. They were putting money ahead of human lives, politics ahead of principle. The final vote was 127 to 98 in favor of economic sanctions. No military action would be taken. Instead, Earth would impose trade restrictions and demand the return of captured humans through diplomatic channels. Marcus left the Senate building that night knowing that the sanctions would be useless. The Zephyrians would ignore them, just as they had ignored previous diplomatic protests. The slave operations would continue, and more humans would suffer and die while politicians made speeches about the importance of peaceful solutions. That night, Marcus sat in his apartment and wrote his resignation letter. After 35 years of service, he could no longer serve a government that would abandon its own people for the sake of political convenience. But before he submitted his resignation, Marcus sent out a coded message through secure military channels. The message went to trusted officers throughout the fleet, to colony defense forces, to merchant marine captains, and to anyone else who might be willing to act when their government would not. The message was simple. The law has been broken. Justice will be served. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Marcus was receiving replies from ship captains, colonial militias, corporate security forces, and even retired military officers. They all wanted to know one thing. What could they do to help? Marcus realized that he wasn't alone. Across human space, there were thousands of people who shared his anger and his determination to act. These were people who understood that some principles were worth fighting for, regardless of the political consequences. 3 days later, Marcus officially resigned from the Terran Navy. His resignation letter was brief and to the point. I can no longer serve a government that values political convenience over human freedom. The sacred law of our people has been broken, and if our leaders will not act, then citizens must. The resignation caused a sensation in the media. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez was a war hero, a respected leader who had served with distinction for decades. His public criticism of the Senate's decision to pursue sanctions instead of military action sparked protests across dozens of human worlds. But Marcus wasn't interested in protests or politics. He was interested in action. Using his personal savings and donations from supporters, he purchased a small fleet of civilian ships and began recruiting volunteers. He called his organization the Liberators, and their mission was simple: find and free every human being held in slavery anywhere in the galaxy. The Liberators operated outside official government channels, but they had widespread support among human civilians. Ship captains volunteered their vessels. Colonial militias provided weapons and supplies. Scientists and intelligence officers shared information about Zephyrian operations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist whose daughter had disappeared during a research expedition in Zephyrian space, became the Liberator's chief intelligence coordinator. She used her contacts in the scientific community to gather information about slave operations throughout the galaxy. What Dr. Vasquez discovered was even worse than what the Defiant Dawn had found. The Zephyrian slave network operated across more than 50 star systems. They had captured people from hundreds of different species, but humans were their preferred targets because of their adaptability and intelligence. "They've been planning this for decades," Dr. Vasquez reported to Marcus during one of their secret meetings. "The slave operation isn't just a profitable side business for them. It's the foundation of their entire economy. Everything they've built, all their wealth and power, comes from the suffering of enslaved beings." The Liberators began with small operations. Single ships would infiltrate Zephyrian space, locate slave transport vessels, and free the prisoners. These early missions were dangerous and difficult, but they were successful. Hundreds of people were rescued and brought back to human space, but each successful mission revealed new horrors. The slaves rescued by the Liberators told stories of torture, medical experiments, and deliberate starvation. Children were separated from their parents and sold to different buyers. Sick and injured slaves were simply left to die. Captain Sarah Chen, who had managed to escape from the camp on Kepler 442c along with several other prisoners, joined the Liberators and became one of their most effective field commanders. Her first-hand knowledge of Zephyrian operations made her invaluable in planning rescue missions. "They think they're untouchable," Sarah told Marcus after her first successful raid. "The Zephyrians believe that political pressure will protect them from any real consequences. They don't understand what they've unleashed, but the Zephyrians were learning." As Liberator raids became more frequent and successful, the aliens began to respond with increasing brutality. For every slave ship that was liberated, they executed dozens of prisoners in retaliation. Guards at the slave camps became more violent, and escape attempts were punished with death. The situation reached a new level of horror when the Zephyrians attacked the human agricultural colony of New Kansas. The planet had been completely neutral in the conflict, with no connection to the Liberators. But the Zephyrians invaded anyway, capturing the entire population of 2.3 million people. The message from the Zephyrian leadership was broadcast across human space. "For every slave you free, we will take 10 humans in return. Continue your illegal activities, and we will reduce every human colony to ashes." The attack on New Kansas finally broke the political deadlock on Earth. Public outrage was so intense that the Senate had no choice but to act. By a vote of 201 to 24, they declared the Zephyrian Syndicate a hostile entity and authorized unlimited military action. Admiral Rodriguez was recalled from his exile and given command of the largest naval force in human history. The official Terran Navy would join with the Liberator fleet to form a combined armada of over 3,000 ships. As Marcus stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the dreadnought Righteous Fury, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. It had started with a simple principle: no sentient being should be enslaved. That principle had cost him his career, his comfortable life, and nearly everything he owned. But it had also given him something far more valuable: the knowledge that he was fighting for something truly important. The coming war would be brutal and costly. Many good people would die, but they would die fighting to protect the most fundamental right of all thinking beings, the right to be free. The Zephyrians had broken humanity's sacred law. They had enslaved humans, tortured them, and threatened to destroy entire colonies. They had built an empire on suffering and called it civilization. Now they would learn that there were some lines that should never be crossed. They would learn that humanity, when finally roused to anger, was capable of terrible vengeance. The war was about to begin, and it would not end until every chain was broken and every slave was free. The price would be paid in blood, but justice would be served. The message from Admiral Rodriguez spread through human space like wildfire. Within days, merchant captains were altering their shipping routes to carry supplies to Liberator bases. Colonial militias were volunteering entire units for rescue operations. Corporate security forces were donating ships and weapons. Even pirates and smugglers were offering their services to the cause. Captain Jake Morrison had been smuggling goods through the outer systems for 15 years. He knew every hidden route, every quiet port, and every corrupt official who could be bought for the right price. When he received Rodriguez's coded message, he didn't hesitate. His ship, the Swift Current, became part of the growing Liberator fleet. "This is bigger than anything I've ever seen," Jake told his crew as they prepared for their first mission. "Half the merchants in the sector are working with us now. The other half are too scared of the Zephyrians to get involved." The Liberators had evolved from a small group of volunteers into something resembling a professional military force. They had their own intelligence network, their own supply lines, and their own command structure. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become their chief strategist, using her scientific contacts throughout the galaxy to map the entire slave trade network. The scope of what Dr. Vasquez discovered was staggering. The Zephyrian slave operation wasn't just limited to a few star systems. It was a galactic network that touched nearly every inhabited region of space. There were supply routes that connected dozens of systems, processing centers where slaves were sorted and sold, and markets where buyers came from across the galaxy to purchase human beings. "Look at this," Dr. Vasquez said, showing Marcus a holographic map of the galaxy during one of their planning sessions. Red lines showed slave transport routes, while red dots marked known camps and processing centers. The map was covered in red. "They've been building this network for over 50 years. It's not just an economic system for them. It's the foundation of their entire civilization." Marcus studied the map with growing anger. Every red dot represented thousands of suffering beings. Every red line represented ships full of people being transported like cargo to unknown fates. The Zephyrians hadn't just violated human law. They had built an entire society based on the suffering of others. "What about their buyers?" Marcus asked. "Who's purchasing these slaves?" "That's the really disturbing part," Dr. Vasquez replied. "It's not just one or two species. We've identified buyers from at least 40 different civilizations. Some are using slaves for manual labor, others for domestic service, and some—" She paused, her face showing disgust. "Some are buying humans for entertainment purposes." Marcus felt his stomach turn. The idea of human beings being purchased for the amusement of alien creatures was almost too horrible to contemplate, but it explained why the Zephyrians had been so successful for so long. They weren't just selling to a few criminal organizations. They were supplying a galactic market for slave labor. Captain Sarah Chen entered the briefing room, still bearing the scars from her time in the Zephyrian camps. She had become one of the Liberators' most effective field commanders, leading dozens of successful rescue missions. "We need to talk about tactics," Sarah said, taking a seat at the conference table. "The Zephyrians are getting smarter. They're increasing security on their transport ships and moving operations to more heavily defended systems." "What are you recommending?" Marcus asked. "We need to hit them harder and faster," Sarah replied. "Instead of targeting individual ships, we need to attack their infrastructure. Take out their processing centers, destroy their supply depots, and eliminate their command posts." Dr. Vasquez nodded in agreement. "Sarah's right. Our intelligence shows that they have 3 major command centers that coordinate operations across entire sectors. If we could eliminate those centers, it would cripple their ability to move slaves efficiently." Marcus considered their recommendations. The Liberators had been successful with small-scale raids, but they hadn't yet attempted anything as ambitious as attacking major Zephyrian installations. Such operations would require more ships, more weapons, and more coordination than they had ever attempted before. "What kind of resistance would we face?" Marcus asked. "Heavy," Sarah admitted. "These aren't lightly defended transport ships. The command centers are protected by battle stations, minefields, and patrol fleets. We'd be looking at significant casualties. But the intelligence value would be enormous," Dr. Vasquez added. "Each command center contains detailed records of every operation in their sector. We'd finally have complete information about the scope of their network." Marcus made his decision. "Plan the operations. We'll hit all 3 command centers simultaneously. If we're going to escalate this conflict, we need to make sure the escalation serves our purposes." The planning took 3 weeks. The Liberators had grown to include over 400 ships of various sizes, from small scout vessels to converted cargo haulers carrying heavy weapons. The fleet was divided into 3 task forces, each assigned to attack one of the Zephyrian command centers. Marcus would personally lead the attack on the primary command center in the Arcturus system. Sarah would command the assault on the secondary center in the Vega system. Captain Morrison would lead the third attack in the distant Proxima system. The attacks were scheduled to occur simultaneously, preventing the Zephyrians from warning each other or sending reinforcements. Each task force would have to fight its way through heavy defenses, capture or destroy the command centers, and extract as much intelligence as possible before withdrawing. 3 days before the attacks were scheduled to begin, Marcus received an unexpected message. It came through official diplomatic channels from the Galactic Trade Council, the organization that regulated commerce between different species. Admiral Rodriguez, the message began, "The Galactic Trade Council is deeply concerned about the increasing violence in the outer systems. We urge you to cease your illegal activities immediately and return to Earth for negotiations. The Zephyrian Syndicate has filed formal complaints about your attacks on their commercial vessels." Marcus deleted the message without finishing it. The Galactic Trade Council had known about the slave operations for years and had done nothing to stop them. Their concern about violence was meaningless when that violence was the only thing that had freed thousands of enslaved beings. The attacks began exactly on schedule. Marcus's task force dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Arcturus system, immediately coming under fire from Zephyrian patrol ships. The battle was fierce and immediate. Liberator ships spread out in attack formation, while Zephyrian reinforcements rushed to defend their command center. All ships, focus fire on the battle station protecting the command center. Marcus ordered over the tactical communications channel. "We need to clear a path for the assault teams." The space around the command center became a maze of explosions and energy beams. Liberator ships darted between larger Zephyrian vessels, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. But the Zephyrians fought back with determination, knowing that the loss of their command center would cripple operations across an entire sector. The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the Zephyrian defenses had been destroyed and the command center was in Liberator hands. The intelligence recovered from the center's computers was beyond anything they had hoped for. Complete records of slave operations across 12 star systems, detailed buyer lists, and financial records showing exactly how much money the Zephyrians had made from human suffering. The other 2 attacks were equally successful. Sarah's force captured the Vega command center after a brutal 4-hour battle, while Morrison's team destroyed the Proxima center and escaped with copies of all the computer files. But the intelligence they recovered brought both good news and bad news. The good news was that they now had a complete picture of the Zephyrian slave network. They knew where every major facility was located, how the transport routes worked, and who was buying slaves from different species. The bad news was that the network was even larger than they had imagined. The 3 command centers had been coordinating operations involving over 2 million enslaved beings across 47 star systems. The Zephyrians weren't just running a large criminal organization. They were operating the biggest slave empire in galactic history. "This changes everything," Dr. Vasquez said as she reviewed the captured data. "We're not fighting a criminal syndicate. We're fighting an entire civilization that has built itself on slavery." The captured intelligence also revealed something else. The Zephyrians were planning a massive expansion of their operations. They had been preparing to launch coordinated raids against dozens of human colonies, planning to capture millions more people to feed their growing network of buyers. Marcus realized that the Liberators had been fighting a defensive war without knowing it. While they had been conducting small-scale rescue operations, the Zephyrians had been preparing for a massive offensive that would have devastated human space. "We can't wait for them to make their move," Marcus told his senior commanders during an emergency meeting. "We have to hit them first, and we have to hit them hard enough to cripple their entire operation." The plan that emerged from that meeting was audacious beyond anything the Liberators had attempted before. They would launch simultaneous attacks on every major Zephyrian facility, identified in the captured intelligence. Supply depots, processing centers, transport hubs, and slave camps across dozens of star systems would all be hit at the same time. It would require coordinating over 1,000 ships and tens of thousands of personnel. The logistics alone were staggering, but Marcus knew they had no choice. The Zephyrians had proven that they couldn't be reasoned with or deterred by limited action. The only way to stop them was to destroy their ability to operate entirely. As word of the planned operation spread through human space, The response was overwhelming. Colony governments offered the use of their defense fleets. Merchant captains volunteered their ships for supply runs. Industrial corporations donated weapons, armor, and medical supplies. But the Zephyrians weren't passive. As reports of liberator activities reached their leadership, they began to respond with escalating brutality. For every facility the liberators attacked, the Zephyrians executed dozens of prisoners in retaliation. Guards at slave camps became more violent and conditions for the prisoners deteriorated rapidly. The breaking point came when the Zephyrians attacked New Kansas. The agricultural colony had been completely neutral in the conflict with no connection to the liberators. Its 2.5 million inhabitants were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and their families. They had no military forces and posed no threat to anyone. The Zephyrian attack was swift and brutal. Military transports descended on the colony's cities and towns, capturing everyone they could find. Resistance was minimal and quickly crushed. Within hours, the entire population of New Kansas had been loaded onto slave ships and transported to processing centers throughout Zephyrian space. The message that accompanied the attack was broadcast across human space. For every slave you free, we will take 10 humans in return. Continue your illegal activities, and we will reduce every human colony to ashes. The attack on New Kansas finally galvanized the Earth government. Public outrage was so intense that even the most cautious politicians couldn't ignore it. The Senate met in emergency session and by an overwhelming vote, declared the Zephyrian Syndicate a hostile entity and authorized unlimited military action. Admiral Rodriguez was recalled from his exile and given command of the largest fleet in human history. The official Terran Navy would join with the Liberator forces to create an armada of over 3,000 ships. The mission was simple: destroy the Zephyrian slave network completely and rescue every human being held in captivity. As Marcus stood on the bridge of his new flagship, he thought about how far they had come. What had started as a small group of volunteers had grown into the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. The Underground Railroad had become a war machine, and that machine was about to be unleashed with the full backing of Earth's government. The Zephyrians had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that political pressure and economic influence would protect them from any serious consequences. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for righteous anger, and had pushed that anger past the breaking point. Now they would face the full wrath of an entire species that had been roused to fury. The war was about to begin, and it would not end until every chain was broken and every slave was free. The combined human fleet gathered at staging areas throughout the frontier systems. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Righteous Fury, watching as ships continued to arrive from across human space. The sight was both inspiring and sobering. Over 3,000 vessels of every size and type, from massive battleships to converted cargo haulers, all united by a single purpose. Captain Sarah Chen approached, carrying the final tactical briefing. Her face was grim as she handed Marcus the datapad containing their target assignments. The intelligence teams have confirmed the locations of 847 Zephyrian facilities across 47 star systems, she reported. Slave camps, processing centers, transport hubs, command posts, and military installations. We'll be hitting all of them simultaneously. Marcus reviewed the operational plan one more time. Operation Broken Chains was the largest military operation in human history. Every major fleet in the Terran Navy was involved, supported by colonial defense forces, corporate security fleets, and the volunteer ships of the original liberators. What's our estimate for rescued prisoners? Marcus asked. Conservatively, over 8 million beings from dozens of species, Sarah replied. But Marcus, the resistance is going to be fierce. The Zephyrians have had time to prepare since New Kansas. They know we're coming. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined them on the bridge, carrying her own set of reports. The xenobiologist had become the operation's chief intelligence coordinator, and her network of contacts had provided crucial information about Zephyrian defenses. The latest intelligence suggests they've been moving their most valuable slaves to heavily fortified facilities, Dr. Vasquez reported. They're using our own people as human shields, hoping we'll hesitate to attack installations where large numbers of humans are being held. Marcus felt his anger rise. Even now, facing the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, the Zephyrians were still thinking like slavers. They couldn't conceive of an enemy that would risk everything to save people they had never met. They still don't understand what they're facing, Marcus said quietly. They think we're like them, that we'll sacrifice principle for convenience. They're about to learn otherwise. The first phase of Operation Broken Chains began at 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time. Across 47 star systems, human ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately engaged Zephyrian defenses. The attacks were coordinated to prevent any facility from warning the others, but even so, the fighting was intense from the very beginning. Marcus led the primary assault force against the Zephyrian stronghold in the Kepler system, the same system where Captain Sarah Chen had first discovered the slave operations months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were returning to where it all began, but this time they came not as explorers but as liberators backed by the full might of human civilization. The battle for Kepler 4042c was brutal. The planet was now ringed with orbital defense platforms and protected by a fleet of Zephyrian warships. The aliens had learned from previous encounters and had prepared formidable defenses. All ships, spread out and engage at maximum range, Marcus commanded. Priority targets are the orbital platforms. We need to clear a path for the landing forces. The space around the planet erupted in explosions and energy beams. Human ships darted between the massive Zephyrian defense platforms, their smaller size and superior maneuverability, allowing them to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. But the defenders fought back with desperate determination, knowing that the loss of this system would signal the beginning of the end for their empire. The battle raged for 8 hours. When the orbital defenses were finally destroyed, landing ships descended to the planet's surface while the fleet engaged the remaining Zephyrian ships. Marcus watched from the bridge as tactical reports streamed in from across the planet. Landing Force Alpha has secured the primary slave compound, came the report from Colonel Williams, commanding the ground assault. Estimate 12,000 prisoners of various species, including approximately 3,000 humans. Landing Force Beta is encountering heavy resistance at the secondary compound, reported Colonel Rodriguez, the Admiral's own nephew. The Zephyrians have fortified positions throughout the facility, requesting immediate air support. The ground fighting was even more brutal than the space battle. The Zephyrians had turned many of the slave compounds into fortresses, using the prisoners as human shields while they fought from heavily defended positions. Human soldiers had to advance carefully, trying to avoid harming the very people they had come to save. But gradually, compound after compound fell to the human assault forces. The sight that greeted the liberating troops was worse than anything they had been prepared for. The conditions in the camps were horrific beyond description. Prisoners were crammed into buildings designed for half their number. Medical care was non-existent. Food and water were rationed to starvation levels. Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's chief medical officer, had accompanied the landing force to provide immediate care for rescued prisoners. His first report to Admiral Rodriguez was barely coherent. "Admiral, the conditions here. I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Webb transmitted from the planet's surface. "We're dealing with severe malnutrition, untreated diseases, and psychological trauma on a scale I can't adequately describe. Some of these people have been prisoners for years." As reports came in from other systems, a pattern emerged. The Zephyrians had been systematically degrading conditions in their slave facilities for months, apparently as a form of collective punishment for the Liberator raids. Prisoners who had once been valuable assets were now being treated as disposable resources. The discovery that enraged the human forces most was the processing centers. These were facilities where newly captured slaves were prepared for sale to different buyers. The preparation process involved medical examinations, psychological conditioning, and in some cases, surgical modifications to make the slaves more suitable for specific types of work. Captain Morrison, leading the assault on the processing center in the Vega system, sent a report that made Admiral Rodriguez physically sick. "Admiral, they've been performing experimental surgeries on human children, trying to enhance their physical capabilities for buyers who want stronger workers. Some of these kids are barely 10 years old." The human forces fought with a fury that surprised even their enemies. Soldiers who had trained for conventional warfare found themselves in situations that demanded every ounce of their moral strength. The sight of what the Zephyrians had done to innocent people transformed disciplined military units into avenging angels. But the Zephyrians fought back with equal desperation. They knew that defeat would mean the complete destruction of their way of life. The slave trade wasn't just their economy, it was the foundation of their entire civilization. Without enslaved labor, their society would collapse within years. The turning point came during the assault on the massive slave processing complex in the Centauri system. The facility was protected by over 50 warships and contained nearly 200,000 prisoners from dozens of species. The battle for the complex lasted 3 days and cost the human forces over 40 ships and thousands of casualties. But when the complex finally fell, the intelligence recovered from its computers revealed the true scope of the Zephyrian operation. The files contained detailed records going back over a century, showing that the slave trade had been the primary source of Zephyrian wealth and power for generations. "This isn't just a criminal enterprise," Dr. Vasquez reported after analyzing the captured data. "Slavery is literally the foundation of their entire economy. Every major Zephyrian corporation, every government institution, every aspect of their society depends on enslaved labor." The records also revealed something else that shocked even the hardened human commanders. The Zephyrians had been planning what they called the Final Harvest, a coordinated attack on over 200 human colonies designed to capture the entire populations for sale to buyers throughout the galaxy. They weren't just planning to expand their operations, Marcus realized as he read the captured plans. They were planning to systematically enslave our entire species. The discovery of the Final Harvest plans eliminated any remaining doubts about the necessity of Operation Broken Chains. The human forces weren't just conducting rescue operations, they were fighting for the survival of their species. As the operation continued, reports of successful liberations poured in from across the galaxy. Hundreds of slave facilities were captured or destroyed. Millions of prisoners were freed and began the long journey back to their homeworlds. But the cost was enormous. Human casualties mounted into the tens of thousands, and dozens of ships were lost in the fighting. The Zephyrians responded to each defeat with escalating brutality. When human forces liberated slave camps, they often found that the guards had executed prisoners rather than allow them to be rescued. Transport ships carrying slaves between facilities were rigged with explosives, threatening to kill everyone aboard if human ships attempted to intercept them. The most horrific incident occurred during the liberation of the slave complex on Zephyr Su. As human forces approached the facility, Zephyrian guards began systematically executing prisoners in the courtyard, broadcasting the killings to the approaching human ships. Captain Sarah Chen, leading the assault force, faced an impossible choice. If she attacked immediately, the guards might kill more prisoners. If she delayed, the executions would continue anyway, and reinforcements might arrive to strengthen the defenses. Sarah made the hardest decision of her military career. She ordered an immediate assault, accepting that some prisoners would die in order to save as many as possible. The battle was swift and brutal, but when it ended, over 30,000 beings had been liberated, though at the cost of nearly 2,000 prisoners who were killed by the guards. The psychological toll on the human forces was enormous. These were soldiers and officers who had joined the military to protect people, and they were being forced to watch helplessly as innocent beings were murdered by their enemies. Some units began to refuse to take Zephyrian prisoners, executing captured guards and officers on the spot. Admiral Rodriguez found himself facing a moral crisis. His forces were beginning to respond to Zephyrian atrocities with atrocities of their own. The desire for vengeance was threatening to transform the liberation operation into a war of extermination. "Sir, we need to address the situation with prisoner executions," Commander Park advised during one of their daily briefings. "Some of our commanders are ordering the summary execution of any Zephyrian found in a slave facility." Marcus understood the anger that was driving his forces, but he also knew that giving in to that anger would make them no better than their enemies. "Issue orders to all commanders. Zephyrian prisoners are to be taken alive when possible and turned over to military tribunals for trial. We're fighting to uphold the law, not to abandon it." But even as Marcus tried to maintain discipline among his forces, he knew that the war had fundamentally changed. What had started as a rescue operation had become something far more significant. The human species was fighting for its survival against an enemy that had built an entire civilization on the enslavement of others. The Zephyrians had broken humanity's sacred law, and they had done it on a scale that defied comprehension. Millions of beings had suffered and died to build their empire. Now that empire was crumbling under the assault of an enraged humanity, and the final reckoning was still to come. The blood price was rising with each passing day, but Admiral Rodriguez knew that there could be no peace until every chain was broken and every slave was free. The war would continue until the Zephyrian slave empire was completely destroyed, no matter what the cost in blood and treasure. Justice demanded nothing less. The final phase of Operation Broken Chains began with the siege of Zephyr Prime, the homeworld of the Zephyrian Syndicate. For 3 months, the human fleet had systematically destroyed slave facilities across dozens of star systems, liberating millions of prisoners and crippling the enemy's economic infrastructure. Now they had come to the heart of the empire that had built itself on suffering. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, studying the tactical display that showed the Zephyrian homeworld and its defenses. The planet was protected by the largest concentration of military forces the Zephyrians had ever assembled. Hundreds of warships, orbital battle stations, and planetary defense systems created overlapping fields of fire that would challenge even the massive human fleet. Final count, Admiral, reported Captain Chen, 2,437 ships, including the entire Terran battle fleet and volunteer forces from 43 human colonies. This is the largest military force our species has ever assembled. Dr. Vasquez approached with the final intelligence briefing. Her analysis of captured Zephyrian data had revealed the true purpose of their final target. The orbital station designated Zephyr Station 1 isn't just a military installation, she reported. It's the central auction house for their entire slave trade network. Our estimates suggest they're holding over 500,000 prisoners there, including nearly 200,000 humans. Marcus felt his jaw clench. The station wasn't just a symbol of Zephyrian power. It was the beating heart of their slave empire. For over a century, sentient beings had been bought and sold in its vast auction chambers while Zephyrian nobles watched from luxury boxes above. "What's the station's defensive capability?" Marcus asked. "Significant," Sarah replied. "Heavy armor, powerful shields, and enough firepower to engage a battle fleet. But it's also the size of a small city. If we damage it too severely during the assault, we could kill the very people we're trying to save." The tactical problem was enormous. The station had to be captured intact to save the prisoners, but it was too well defended to be taken easily. A direct assault would result in massive casualties on both sides. A siege would give the Zephyrians time to execute prisoners or call for reinforcements. "What about the planetary government?" Marcus asked. "Any sign they're willing to negotiate?" Dr. Vasquez shook her head. Their last transmission was a formal declaration that they would rather die than surrender their economic assets to what they called human terrorists. They're calling this a war for the survival of their civilization. Marcus understood their position. The Zephyrians had built their entire society on slave labor. Without enslaved beings to work their mines, factories, and farms, their economy would collapse and their standard of living would plummet. They were fighting for their way of life, which made them even more dangerous, but they had also made a fundamental miscalculation. They assumed that humans would eventually grow tired of the war and accept a negotiated settlement that allowed some form of slavery to continue. They couldn't comprehend that humanity would sacrifice everything to ensure that not a single sentient being remained in chains. "Open a channel to all ships," Marcus ordered. "It's time to address the fleet." The communication system connected him to every ship in the human armada. On screens throughout the fleet, soldiers, sailors, and officers saw their commander preparing to speak. Many of these people had volunteered for the mission knowing they might not survive. They had left their families and homes to fight for strangers they had never met. "To all personnel of the Liberation Fleet," Marcus began, "we stand at the gates of the empire that has caused more suffering than any other force in galactic history. For over a century, the Zephyrians have built their wealth on the pain of enslaved beings. They have taken our people, our children, and turned them into property to be bought and sold." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. These were good people who had given everything to fight for what was right. Today we end their empire forever. The station before us contains 500,000 prisoners, including 200,000 of our own people. We will free every one of them, and we will ensure that no other sentient being ever suffers as they have suffered. The channel remained open as reports came in from across the fleet. Ship after ship confirmed their readiness for the final assault. Colonial militias, Terran Navy regulars, corporate security forces, and volunteer crews all united by their determination to see justice done. The battle began at dawn, Zephyr prime time. The human fleet spread out in attack formation, engaging the outer defensive perimeters while assault ships raced toward their primary targets. The space around the planet became a maze of explosions and energy beams as the largest space battle in galactic history unfolded. Marcus watched the tactical display as his ships fought their way through layer after layer of Zephyrian defenses. The enemy fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat would mean the end of everything they had built. But human determination proved stronger than Zephyrian desperation. Breakthrough on Vector 7, reported the tactical officer. Assault squadrons are approaching Zephyr Station 1. The massive orbital station was a city-sized structure that had served as the center of the galactic slave trade for generations. Its auction chambers could hold thousands of prisoners at once, while its detention levels contained holding areas for hundreds of thousands more. The station's computer systems contained records of every slave transaction for the past 50 years. Captain Sarah Chen led the assault on the station personally, commanding a force of specially trained Marines equipped for boarding operations. The fighting inside the station was brutal and personal. Zephyrian guards used prisoners as human shields, forcing the Marines to advance carefully through corridors filled with terrified civilians. Deck by deck, room by room, Sarah commanded over the tactical channel. Every prisoner we save makes this worth it. The liberation of Zephyr Station 1 took 18 hours of continuous fighting. When it was over, the Marines had freed 547,000 prisoners from dozens of species. The sight that greeted them in the holding areas was beyond description. Beings who had been treated as cargo were crammed into spaces barely large enough for half their number. Many were sick, injured, or psychologically broken by their ordeal. But among the rescued prisoners were thousands of humans who had been captured years earlier. Families that had been separated during raids were reunited. Children who had grown up in slavery saw the sun for the first time in their lives. Adults who had given up hope of ever being free again wept as human soldiers cut their chains. Dr. Webb and his medical teams worked around the clock to provide care for the rescued prisoners. Many required immediate surgery or intensive care just to survive. Others needed psychological counseling to deal with the trauma of their captivity. But they were alive and they were free. The capture of Zephyr Station 1 broke the back of Zephyrian resistance. With their primary command center in human hands and their slave trade infrastructure destroyed, the remaining Zephyrian forces began to surrender or flee to neutral space. But the Zephyrian leadership made one final attempt to negotiate. A transmission from the planetary government reached the human fleet, offering to discuss terms for ending the conflict. Admiral Rodriguez received the transmission in his ready room, accompanied by Captain Chen and Dr. Vasquez. The Zephyrian official on the screen was obviously desperate, his scaled features showing fear and exhaustion. "Admiral Rodriguez," the Zephyrian began, "surely we can reach some accommodation. We are prepared to offer significant reparations for any irregularities in our labor practices. We can establish new regulations to ensure proper treatment of workers." Marcus felt disgust rise in his throat. Even now, facing total defeat, the Zephyrians couldn't bring themselves to use the word slavery. They still thought of their victims as workers, as assets, as anything except people. "You broke the only law that mattered," Marcus replied, his voice cold as space. "There will be no negotiation, no mercy, no quarter. Blood for blood." The transmission ended and Marcus gave the order for the final assault on the planet's surface. The remaining Zephyrian military forces were quickly overwhelmed by the combined human fleet. Cities surrendered without resistance as the civilian population realized that continued fighting would only bring more death. The liberation of Zephyr Prime marked the end of the Zephyrian Syndicate as a political entity. Their government collapsed, their military was destroyed, and their economy was in ruins. The survivors scattered to other systems, but they would never again have the power to enslave anyone. In the months that followed, human forces continued to hunt down the remnants of the slave trade network. Ships full of prisoners were intercepted and liberated. Hidden slave camps were discovered and destroyed. Buyers who had purchased enslaved beings were tracked down and forced to release their victims. The total count of liberated prisoners reached over 8 million beings from dozens of species. But the cost had been enormous. Nearly a quarter of the human fleet had been destroyed in the fighting. Hundreds of thousands of human soldiers, sailors, and officers had died in the war. Entire colonies had sacrificed their defense fleets to support the liberation effort. Captain Sarah Chen, now bearing the scars of dozens of battles, established the Stellar Liberation Corps as a permanent military force dedicated to preventing the rise of any new slave empire. The Corps would patrol the galaxy, ready to respond to any reports of slavery or forced labor anywhere in known space. Admiral Rodriguez retired from active duty, but remained as an advisor to the Terran government. His final act was to establish a memorial on Earth for all those who had died in the Liberation War. The names of every human who had given their life for the cause were carved into black stone, along with a simple inscription: "They died so others might live free." The war had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. Other species that had tolerated or ignored the slave trade now understood that humans would never accept such practices. The single law that governed human space had been written in the ashes of an entire civilization, and the message was clear across the stars: break humanity's law regarding slavery, and face complete destruction. The freed prisoners gradually returned to their home worlds, carrying with them stories of human sacrifice and determination. Many species that had previously viewed humans as just another ambitious race now saw them differently. They were the people who had sacrificed everything to free strangers they had never met. Dr. Elena Vasquez continued her research, but now her work focused on helping liberated prisoners recover from their trauma and rebuild their lives. She established treatment centers throughout human space, staffed by volunteers who understood that freedom was meaningless without the support to use it. Years later, as Marcus stood before the memorial wall reading the names of the fallen, he reflected on what they had accomplished. The war had been terrible and costly, but it had been necessary. The Zephyrian slave empire was gone forever, and millions of beings were free because good people had been willing to fight for what was right. The galaxy was a safer place now, but Marcus knew that vigilance would always be required. There would always be those who sought to profit from the suffering of others. There would always be those who viewed sentient beings as property to be owned and sold. But humanity had proven that such evil would never go unopposed. They had shown that some principles were worth any sacrifice, that some laws were written in blood and could never be broken without consequence. The war was over, but the watch would continue forever. As long as humans existed among the stars, no sentient being would ever again be bought, sold, or owned by another. That was humanity's promise to the galaxy, sealed with the blood of heroes who had died to make it reality. The price had been paid and justice had been served. Captain Jack Walker stood tall on the bridge of the human ship Olive Branch. The ship was not big or fancy, but it was clean and showed Earth's best side. Its name was painted in large white letters on the dark hull. Jack had been a captain for 15 years. He had gray at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of looking at stars. "Sir, we are 10 minutes from the Crek station," said Lieutenant Max Reed. He was young with short brown hair and quick eyes. This was his first big mission. "Thank you, Max. Is our gift ready?" asked Jack. "Yes, sir. The art pieces and music files are ready to give to the Krek's leaders." Jack nodded. He knew this meeting was important. Humans had only found the Kreks 6 months ago. They were the 5th alien race that humans had met since leaving Earth 50 years ago. The Kreks had big ships and many planets. They looked like tall blue beings with 4 arms and flat faces. The Olive Branch slowed as it came near the huge Krek space station. The station looked like a gray wheel with spikes coming out from all sides. Krek ships moved around it like busy insects. Most were warships with heavy guns. "They sure like to show their weapons," said Max quietly. "Yes," said Jack. "That's why we need to be extra friendly. We don't want trouble." A voice came through the ship's speakers. It was deep and had a strange clicking sound between words. "Human ship, follow the guide lights to dock at Arm 7. This is Captain Walker." "Thank you." "We are following your lights now," Jack said into the speaker. The human ship moved slowly to its place at the station. Jack took a deep breath. "Max, you and Tom come with me. Everyone else stays on the ship." Tom was the ship's science officer. He was older than Max, but still younger than Jack. He had dark skin and always carried a small computer to take notes. The 3 men walked down the hall to the airlock door where they would meet the Kreks. They all wore their best blue uniforms, with the Earth symbol, a circle with olive branches on their chests. "Remember," said Jack as they waited, "no sudden moves. Keep your hands where they can see them. We want to look peaceful." The airlock hissed open. 3 Creks stood there. They were 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin that looked hard like armor. Each had 4 arms and wore metal clothes that shined under the lights. Their faces had no nose, just flat areas with breathing holes. Their eyes were large and yellow. The middle Krek stepped forward. "I am High Commander Drez. You are on Krek's territory now." Jack gave a small bow. "Thank you for letting us visit. I am Captain Jack Walker. This is Lieutenant Max Reed and Science Officer Tom Green." The Kreks did not bow back. They looked at the humans with cold eyes. "Follow," said Drez, turning sharply. The humans followed the Kreks down a wide hallway. Everything was made of dark metal. Other Kreks stopped to stare at the humans as they passed. None looked friendly. "They don't seem to like us much," whispered Max. "They're a warrior race," said Tom quietly. "They respect strength first." They entered a large round room with a table in the center. 10 more Kreks waited there. They all wore metal clothes with different colored marks showing their rank. "Sit," ordered Drez, pointing to 3 chairs on one side of the table. Jack and his officers sat down. Jack placed a small box on the table. "High Commander, we bring gifts from Earth. Art and music to share our culture with yours." Drez looked at the box but did not touch it. "We have no interest in human art. We want to know about your weapons and ships." Jack smiled politely. "We came to talk about trade and friendship between our peoples. Earth wants peaceful relations with all. Peace is for the weak." Cut in another Kreks at the table. This one had red marks on his metal clothes. "Strong races take what they need." Jack kept his smile, though it was harder now. "On Earth we found that working together helps everyone grow stronger." The Kreks made clicking sounds to each other that the humans' translators couldn't catch. They seemed to be laughing. "We have studied your ships," said Drez. "They are slow and have few weapons. Your planets are not well protected. Tell us why we should see humans as equals when you are clearly inferior." Tom shifted in his chair. Max's face turned slightly red. Jack kept his calm. "Strength comes in many forms," Jack said. "Technology, yes, but also art, ideas, working together. Earth has much to offer in trade." "Show us," demanded Drez. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small round device. "This is a simple thing we call a peace token. It projects images of Earth." Jack pressed a button and the device lit up, showing pictures of Earth's oceans, mountains, and cities in the air above the table. As Jack moved his hand to point at a picture of New York, he accidentally made a quick gesture with his fingers. "Spread." He did not know that this same hand sign was the worst insult in Krek's culture. The room went completely silent. The Kreks all stared at Jack with their yellow eyes now wide with anger. "You dare?" growled Drez, standing up so fast his chair fell over. "You dare make the death sign to the High Commander of the Kreks?" Jack realized something was very wrong. He lowered his hand quickly. "I'm sorry if I made a gesture that offended you. In human culture, this means nothing bad. It was an accident." "Silence," shouted Drez. His top 2 arms reached for weapons at his sides. "No one makes the death sign to a Kreks and lives." Max stood up. "Sir, please. My captain meant no disrespect. We don't know all your customs yet." Tom tried to help. "This is just a cultural difference. We can learn." "Guards," called Drez. The doors opened and 6 armed Kreks rushed in. "Take the humans." Jack stood up now too. "High Commander, please, let's talk about this. It was a simple mistake." But the Kreks would not listen. The guards grabbed the 3 humans roughly with their forearms. "The law is clear," said Drez. "The one who made the sign must die. The others will watch and then carry the message back to Earth." "No!" shouted Max as 2 guards pulled Jack away from them. "This is wrong," said Jack calmly, though his heart was racing. "Think about what you're doing. This will not lead to peace between our peoples." Drez came close to Jack's face. "Peace is not what we want with weak races. We want respect. Now your death will teach humans to fear the Kreks." 4 hours later, Max and Tom were forced to watch as Jack was brought to a large open area of the station. Hundreds of Creks had gathered. To see, Drez spoke to the crowd. This human has insulted the Creks people. The punishment is death. Despite Jack's dignity and attempts to explain, the Creks showed no mercy. With cold efficiency, they carried out their sentence. Later, a shaken Max and Tom were put back on the olive branch with a data chip. On it was a recording of what had happened to Jack. "Tell your leaders," said Drez as the airlock began to close. "This is what happens when lesser beings do not know their place. The Creks are the future of the galaxy. Humans would be wise to remember that." The olive branch pulled away from the station, its captain gone forever. Max sat in Jack's chair, his hands shaking with grief and anger. "Set course for Earth." "Full speed," he said to the pilot. "They need to know what happened here." As the ship jumped to light speed, Max looked out at the stars. "They have no idea what they've just done," he whispered. The olive branch emerged from light speed near Earth's orbital defense ring. The once peaceful diplomatic vessel now carried a terrible message. Lieutenant Max Reed, now acting captain, sat in the command chair that had belonged to Captain Walker just days before. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Earth Defense Command is hailing us," said the communications officer, her voice tight with emotion. Everyone on the ship knew what had happened. "Put them through," Max said. A stern face appeared on the main screen. "This is Admiral Kate Stone. Olive Branch, we expected your return 3 days ago. Where is Captain Walker?" Max took a deep breath. "Admiral, I need to speak with the Defense Council immediately. Captain Walker is dead. Executed by the Creks." The Admiral's face showed shock for only a moment before turning to Stone. "Dock at Station Alpha. The Council will meet you there." 4 hours later, Max stood in the large round chamber where the United Earth Defense Council met. 12 men and women in dark blue uniforms sat at a curved table. Above them, the Earth flag, blue with white stars forming the shape of a dove, hung on the wall. Admiral Stone stood at a display screen. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in the last Earth, war 20 years ago, and now led Earth's defense forces. "Play the recording," she ordered. Max handed over the data chip the Creks had given him. His hand shook slightly, the lights dimmed, and the recording began to play on the large screen. Everyone in the room watched in silence as Captain Walker was led before the Creks crowd. They heard his final dignified words as he tried once more to explain the cultural misunderstanding. Then they watched as the Creks carried out their cold sentence. Several council members turned away. When it ended, the lights came back up. "Admiral," Stone's face was like iron. "Lieutenant Reed," she said quietly, "tell us everything." Max explained the meeting, the peaceful intentions, and the simple hand gesture that the Creks had seen as the worst insult. "They wouldn't listen to reason," Max finished. "They seemed almost happy to have an excuse to kill him." Tom Green, the science officer who had also witnessed everything, added, "They called us a lesser race. They wanted us to know our place." The Paisinar's oldest council member, a man named General Roberts, stood up. "The Creks have been watching us for months. They've seen our science ships, our traders, but they've never seen what we can really do." Admiral Stone nodded. "They think we're weak because we approach in peace." "They don't know our history," said another council member. "They don't know what humanity is capable of when pushed." Admiral Stone turned to the center of the room where a hidden control panel rose from the floor. She placed her hand on it and a scanner read her fingerprints. "Computer, activate protocol Sleeping Giant," she said clearly. "Authorization, Stone, Admiral Kate, 77 Alpha Sunrise." The computer responded. "Protocol Sleeping Giant activated. Awaiting council approval." One by one, each council member spoke their approval. As the last one finished, the large screen changed to show a map of the solar system. Red dots began to appear all through the map. "What are those?" asked Max, watching, as hundreds of red dots lit up. "Those, Lieutenant," said Admiral Stone, "are Earth's real military ships." General Roberts explained. "After the last Earth War, Humanity decided to stop showing its weapons to the galaxy. We built ships that looked simple and peaceful, but we never stopped building our true fleet. We keep them hidden, powered down, throughout the solar system. Max stared in wonder. All these ships were here all along? Yes, said Admiral Stone. Earth learned a hard lesson from its own wars. When you show your weapons, others build bigger ones. It leads to fights no one wants. So we hid our real strength and showed only our peaceful side. The red dots on the screen were moving now, gathering in groups. How many ships? Asked Tom. Over 500, answered Admiral Stone. Fast attack vessels, heavy destroyers, carriers with fighter squadrons, technology the Creks have never seen. But why keep this secret from your own people? Asked Max. Most people don't know because most don't need to know, said General Roberts. The fewer who know, the better the secret stays hidden. Only those at the highest levels of Earth defense are told. Admiral Stone touched the control panel again, and the screen changed to show designs of ships Max had never seen before. They were sleek and dark, built for speed and power. These ships have cloaking technology, advanced AI battle systems, and weapons the Creks can't match, she said. Now we will use them. Max felt a mix of pride and fear. What's the plan? Admiral, Stone's eyes were cold. The Creks think we're weak, they're wrong. First we need to know everything about them. You two were there. Tell us their weaknesses. For the next hour, Max and Tom described everything they had seen on the Crek station. Their technology, their ship designs, their tactics. Their ships are heavily armed at the front, but the rear shielding looked weaker, Tom explained. And they rely too much on size and power. They don't expect quick, smart attacks. Admiral Stone nodded. Good. Now we know where to hit them. What about diplomacy? Asked a female council member. Should we try one more time to talk? Admiral Stone's face hardened. They had their chance for diplomacy when they killed Captain Walker. Now they'll learn what humanity can really do. She turned back to the screen and pressed more controls. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Stone. Sleeping Giant protocol is now active. Battle groups 1 through 5 prepare for immediate deployment to Crek space. The council chamber filled with the sounds of acknowledgments from ship captains across the solar system. Max watched in amazement as the screen showed Earth's hidden fleet powering up. Ships were rising from secret bases on the dark side of the moon, from hidden docks in the asteroid belt, and from underwater bases on Europa. The Creks will be watching our communications, warned Tom. They'll hear us preparing. Admiral Stone smiled for the first time, but it wasn't a kind smile. Good. Let them hear. But they won't believe it until they see it. She turned to Max and put a hand on his shoulder. Lieutenant Reed, or should I say Captain Reed now, the olive branch will stay here. You've done your part. You brought us the message. Max stood straighter. Admiral, with respect, I want to go with the fleet. I saw what they did to Captain Walker. I need to be there. Admiral Stone studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well. You'll join me on the flagship Retribution. Your knowledge of the Creks will be useful. Meanwhile, across the vast emptiness of space, the Creks High Command was indeed monitoring Earth communications. In their central command chamber, High Commander Drez listened to the human transmissions. They speak of ships and attacks, said one of his officers. They seem angry about the death of their captain. Drez made the clicking sound that was Krek's laughter. Let them be angry. Their ships are no match for ours. They speak brave words, but they are a young, weak species. Should we prepare our defenses? Asked another officer. Post a few extra patrols, said Drez dismissively. But don't worry too much. The humans are just making noise to save their pride. They know they cannot win against the Creks. Little did he know that across the solar system, Earth's true military power was awakening. Ships that had waited in darkness for years were now lighting up their engines. Weapons that had been kept secret were being armed, and Admiral Stone, standing on the bridge of the massive battleship Retribution, gave the order that would change everything. All ships, set course for Crek space. The time for hiding our strength is over. The olive branch broke through Earth's atmosphere, its engines burning bright against the dark sky. The ship carried terrible news. Lieutenant Max Reed sat in the captain's chair, a place that felt wrong without Captain Walker. His face was tired and his uniform still had traces of his friend's blood. "Earth Defense Station calling Olive Branch," came a voice over the radio. "Please identify and state your purpose." Max leaned forward. "This is Lieutenant Reed of the Olive Branch. Captain Walker is dead. Murdered by the Creks. I need to speak with Earth Command immediately." There was a long silence. Then, "Understood, Olive Branch. Follow landing path to Base 1. Command is waiting." The ship descended toward the main Earth defense base hidden in the Rocky Mountains. Giant doors in the mountainside opened, revealing a hangar large enough for many ships. The Olive Branch settled onto the landing pad with a soft hiss. As soon as the doors opened, a group of serious-looking officers in blue uniforms met them. Leading them was Admiral Kate Stone. She was tall with short gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen too much war. "Lieutenant Reed," she said, "come with me. The Defense Council is waiting." Max followed her through long hallways deep into the mountain. Tom Green, the science officer who had also witnessed the execution, walked beside him. Neither man had slept well since watching their captain die. They entered a large room where 10 people sat around a round table. Maps of the galaxy covered the walls. In the center of the table was Earth's symbol, a blue globe with olive branches. "Tell us what happened," said Admiral Stone. "Don't leave anything out." Max took a small data chip from his pocket. His hand shook slightly. "The Creks gave us this. It shows everything." A technician took the chip and inserted it into a console. The large screen on the wall lit up. Everyone watched in silence as the recording played. It showed Captain Walker standing tall before the Creks leaders. It showed his attempt to explain the misunderstanding. It showed how the Creks ignored his words and carried out their cruel sentence. When it ended, the room was completely silent. Then Admiral Stone slammed her fist on the table. "They will pay for this." An older man with white hair stood up. "I am General Davis. Lieutenant, tell us about the Creks. What did you see of their weapons? Their ships?" Max and Tom described everything they had observed, the layout of the Creks station, the number of ships, the weapons they carried. "They're strong," Max finished. "But they're arrogant. They think we're weak because we came in peace." Admiral Stone walked to a control panel on the wall. "Computer, show Protocol Thunder." The screen changed to show a map of the solar system. Then one by one, hundreds of small lights began to appear throughout the map. "What are those?" asked Max, confused. Admiral Stone's face was grim. "Those, Lieutenant, are Earth's real warships." Max stared at the screen. "I don't understand. I know every ship in the fleet. These aren't on any list." "No, they wouldn't be," said General Davis. "After the Great War 50 years ago, Earth made a decision. We would approach the stars in peace, but we would always be ready for war." "Admiral," Stone nodded. "The ships, you know, the exploration vessels, the science ships, the diplomatic cruisers like the Olive Branch, those are what we show to the galaxy. But these," she pointed to the lights on the screen, "these are what we kept hidden." The screen zoomed in to show one of the ships. It was sleek and black, with weapon ports along its sides. It looked nothing like the bright, smooth ships Max was used to seeing. "We built them in secret," continued Admiral Stone. "Hid them in asteroid fields behind moons, in gas clouds, kept them powered down so they wouldn't be detected. Each one is faster and more powerful than anything the Creks have seen from us." "Over 500 ships," said General Davis, "crewed by our best soldiers ready to fight at a moment's notice." Max felt his mouth go dry. "All this time we had these ships? Why didn't anyone know?" Admiral Stone's eyes were hard. "Because, Lieutenant, the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. The Creks think they know our strength. They're wrong." She turned to the rest of the council. "I propose we activate Protocol Thunder. The Creks have killed one of our own. They believe we are weak. It's time to show them how wrong they are." One by one, the council members nodded. Admiral Stone touched more controls on the panel. "Computer, send wake-up signal to all Thunder ships. Authorization. Stone, 7 to 7 Delta 9. The computer's voice responded. Signal sent. All ships acknowledging. On the screen, the hundreds of lights began to pulse brighter. What happens now? Asked Tom. Now, said Admiral Stone, we prepare for war. Lieutenant Reed, you and Officer Green know the Crex better than anyone else. Alive on Earth. I want you both on my command ship, the Vengeance. Max stood straighter. Yes, Admiral. We're ready. General Davis stepped forward. The Crex think they taught us a lesson. But they're about to learn something about humans that many have learned before. We do not take kindly to being bullied. Across the solar system, hidden ships were coming to life. In the dark space behind Jupiter's moons, 10 black destroyers powered up their engines. In the asteroid belt, 20 fast attack ships detached from the rocks that had hidden them. From Earth's dark oceans, massive carriers rose into the sky, water streaming from their hulls. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral Stone watched her fleet gather. The ship was huge, with a crew of 300. Its black hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Along its sides were weapon ports for missiles and energy cannons that could cut through the strongest armor. Max stood at her side, looking at the tactical display. Hundreds of ships were forming into battle groups. The Crex will detect our communications, said Tom, who stood at a science station. They'll know we're coming. Admiral Stone's smile was cold. Good. I want them to hear us. I want them to be afraid. At that moment, across the vast emptiness of space, High Commander Drez of the Crex stood in his command center. A junior officer approached him, looking nervous. High Commander, we are detecting unusual activity in the human system, the officer reported. Many communications. They speak of thunder ships and battle groups. They mention your name, sir. Drez made the clicking sound that was Crex laughter. So the humans are angry about their dead captain? Let them be angry. Their ships are toys compared to ours. But, sir, they speak of hundreds of ships. Impossible, said Drez dismissively. We have observed them for months. They have perhaps 50 ships, most of them science vessels and cargo carriers. They are lying to sound brave. The officer bowed and left, still looking worried. Back on the Vengeance, Admiral Stone gave the order that all of Earth had been waiting for. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. The Crex have shown us what they think of peace. Now we will show them what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. All ships set course for Crex space. Operation Thunder begins now. As one, the Earth fleet moved into formation. Hundreds of engines lit up the darkness as they aligned for the jump to light speed. Max looked out at the stars through the bridge window. This isn't what Captain Walker would have wanted, he said quietly. Admiral Stone put a hand on his shoulder. No, he wanted peace. But sometimes, Lieutenant, you have to fight for the right to have peace later. With a flash of light, the first wave of Earth ships disappeared into light speed, heading for Crex space. The war had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn a terrible truth. Humans might come in peace, but they would never allow themselves to be victims. The sleeping giant had awakened. The vast blackness of space remained quiet until suddenly it wasn't. Like ghosts appearing from nowhere, 50 Earth ships emerged from light speed at the edge of the Crex border system. The ships were nothing like the bright, smooth vessels the Crex had seen before. These were dark, angular, and bristling with weapons. In the lead ship, the massive destroyer Vengeance, Admiral Stone stood on the bridge. Her uniform was crisp, her face set like stone. Beside her stood newly promoted Captain Max Reed and Science Officer Tom Green. All ships report ready, Admiral, said the communications officer. We are in position and undetected. Admiral Stone nodded. Begin Operation Ghost. First wave, activate stealth systems and move to your targets. Max watched the tactical display as 20 smaller ships broke formation. They seemed to fade from view as their stealth systems engaged, becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. Will this really work? Max asked quietly. The Crex have advanced sensors. Advanced, yes, said Tom. But designed to detect the kind of ships they think we have. These ships use completely different technology. On the tactical screen, the stealth ships approached a Crex outpost, a small station orbiting the system's outer planet. The station was shaped like a wheel with spikes extending outward. It looked just like the one where Captain Walker had died. First target in range, reported the weapons officer. Waiting for your command. Admiral Stone's voice was calm. Fire. From the nearly invisible Earth ships, bright energy beams lanced out. They struck the Crek station with surgical precision, targeting communication arrays and weapon systems. Within seconds, the station was dark and silent, disabled, but not destroyed. Second wave, begin your approach, ordered Admiral Stone. 10 more ships moved forward, heading to a larger Krek's base on one of the system's moons. This time the Kreks detected them, but too late. Krek's vessels are launching, reported the sensor. Officer. 5 ships, heavy cruiser class. Let them come, said Admiral Stone. Captain Reed, this is your area. What's their likely approach? Max studied the tactical display. Based on what we saw at their station, they'll come in fast and direct. They don't believe in subtlety. Their front weapons are their strongest. Perfect, said Admiral Stone with a thin smile. Thunder Group 2, execute Maneuver Wasp. The B. Earth ships suddenly split apart, moving in seemingly random patterns. The Krek's cruisers, huge and heavily armed at the front, tried to track them but couldn't match their speed and agility. They're confused, said Max, watching the Krek's ships. Movements become less certain. They've never seen ships move like this. Earth vessels darted around the Krek's cruisers, firing precise shots at engines and weapon ports. They never stayed in one place long enough to be targeted. The Krek's ships, designed for head-on battles, couldn't bring their main weapons to bear. Within 10 minutes, all 5 Krek's cruisers were drifting, their engines disabled and their weapons offline. No Krek's casualties reported, said Tom, checking his scanner. Just as you ordered, Admiral. Good, said Admiral Stone. I want them alive to report what happened here. Across the system, more Earth ships appeared, targeting Krek's outposts and patrols. Each time the result was the same, surgical strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. On the main Krek's command station, alarms blared. High Commander Drez rushed into the command center, his yellow eyes wide with surprise. Report, he demanded. What is happening? A nervous officer approached. High Commander, we are under attack in 6 different systems. The human ships, they are nothing like what we have seen before. They appear from nowhere, strike, and disappear. Impossible, roared Drez. The humans have no such technology. Their ships are simple and weak. The officer's 4 hands worked quickly over the control panel. The main screen showed images from different Krek's outposts, all showing the same thing. Dark, powerful Earth ships moving with incredible speed and precision. These are not the ships we observed, said the officer. These are something else. Drez stared at the screen, his confidence failing for the first time. How many? We have confirmed over 200 different vessels. There may be more we cannot detect. Another officer rushed in. High Commander, the military academy station is under attack. Drez's body went rigid. The military academy was where young Kreks learned to become warriors. It was also where his own son was training. Send all available ships to defend the academy, he ordered. Now, at the Krek's military academy, a massive space station shaped like a 6-pointed star, 40 young Krek's cadets watched in fear as their instructors rushed to battle stations. Through the viewports, they could see Earth ships appearing from lightspeed. 15 sleek destroyers and 1 much larger vessel. That's the Vengeance, said Max, pointing to the tactical display on the Vengeance's bridge. The Krek's Academy is heavily defended, but it's mainly a training facility. Admiral Stone nodded. Which is why we won't fire first. Open a channel. The, communications officer worked his controls. Channel open, Admiral. Admiral Stone stood straight. Her voice was clear and cold. Krek's Military Academy, this is Admiral Kate Stone of the Earth Defense Force. You have 1 hour to evacuate all cadets to the emergency shuttles. We will not fire on unarmed vessels. Once the cadets are clear, we will disable your station. This is not negotiable. There was a long silence. Then a gruff Krek's voice responded. This is Battlemaster Crone. We do not take orders from lesser beings. The Kreks do not surrender. This is not a request for surrender. replied Admiral Stone. "This is a chance to save your young ones. You killed one of ours. We could destroy you all, but we choose not to. Consider this education." She signaled to cut the communication. Now we wait. For 45 minutes, nothing happened. Then, small shuttles began launching from the Academy station. "They're evacuating," said Tom, checking his scanner. "Life signs indicate mostly younger Creks." Max looked at Admiral Stone. "They're actually listening." "Even the proudest warrior will protect their children," she said. "Prepare main weapons. As soon as the last shuttle is clear, we disable the station." 20 minutes later, the last shuttle cleared the Academy. With precision that would have been impossible with the ships the Creks thought Earth had, the Vengeance, and its escort ships fired. Power systems, weapons, engines, all were targeted and disabled. Within minutes, the once mighty Academy station was dark and silent. As the Earth fleet prepared to move to its next target, a message came through on all channels. It was High Commander Drez himself. "Humans," his voice was tight with rage, "you attack like cowards striking from shadows. You disable rather than destroy. Is this how your kind fights?" Admiral Stone signaled to respond. "This is Admiral Stone. We fight to win, Commander. You killed one of ours to teach us a lesson. Consider this our response." "This changes nothing," growled Drez. "The Creks have the largest fleet in this sector. We will crush your ships, no matter how many you have hidden." "You're welcome to try," replied Admiral Stone calmly. "But know this. What you've seen today is only our first wave. There is much more to come." As the communication ended, Max looked at the tactical display showing the Earth fleet's movements across Crek space. He doesn't understand yet, does he? He still thinks he can win. Admiral Stone's face was grim. He will learn. All Krek's vessels are reporting what they've seen today. Soon they will realize that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. Tom checked his scanner again. "Reports coming in from all sectors, Admiral. Operation Ghost is 100% successful. All targets disabled with minimal Krek's casualties." "Excellent," said Admiral Stone. "Prepare for Phase 2. It's time the Kreks learned what humanity is truly capable of." Across Krek space, the message spread quickly from ship to ship, station to station. The humans were not what they seemed. Their real ships were faster, stronger, more advanced. And this was only the beginning. The war had begun, and it was nothing like the Kreks had expected. The war between humans and Kreks entered its third week. In orbit around the Kreks mining moon Dax 7, a massive battle raged. 20 Kreks battleships, each one shaped like a pointed hammer with glowing red engines, faced off against just 5 human vessels. The human ships were smaller, darker, and moved like shadows between the stars. "All ships, evasive pattern Delta," ordered Captain Ben West from the bridge of the Swift Justice. His ship dove sharply, narrowly avoiding a heavy plasma blast from the lead Kreks vessel. "They've adapted to our movements," said his first officer, Jane Wilson. "They're learning." Captain West nodded. "Yes, but not fast enough. Activate the Shade Protocol." At his command, all 5 human ships suddenly released, small devices that expanded into clouds of dark energy. To Krek sensors, it looked like the human ships had multiplied into 30 identical vessels, all moving in different directions. "The Kreks are splitting their fire," reported the tactical officer. "Their formation is breaking." West smiled grimly. "Now, all ships target their engine cores. Fire when ready." From the real human ships hidden among the decoys, precise energy beams lanced out. Each one hit a Krek's ship exactly where its engine connected to its power core. One by one, the massive Krek's vessels lost power, their red engine glow fading to black. Back on Earth, in the underground war room beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Stone watched the battle updates with Captain Max Reed and Chief Engineer Tom Reeves at her side. Tom had been promoted from science officer to lead the new weapons development team. "Another victory," said Admiral Stone as the report came in. "Captain West disabled all 20 Krek ships with no casualties on either side." Max nodded, but his face was serious. "They're adapting faster than we expected. Their new shield configurations nearly blocked our precision strikes. Tom stepped forward, pointing to the holographic display showing the Krex fleet movements. Admiral, the Krex are pulling back their forces. They're creating a defensive line around their home system. Admiral Stone studied the display. They're preparing for a last stand. An aide approached with a data tablet. Admiral, the Council wants to speak with you. Stone took the tablet. On its screen appeared the 12 members of the Earth Defense Council. Admiral, said General Davis, the head of the Council, your strategy has been successful. The Krex have been pushed back to their home system with minimal casualties on both sides. But now they're gathering their entire fleet for a final battle. Yes, sir, said Admiral Stone. We estimate they have over 500 ships remaining. They'll make their stand at their homeworld. And our losses so far? Asked another council member. 7 ships damaged beyond repair, 12 with moderate damage but still in the fight. Total human casualties, 35. The council members looked at each other, impressed. The question now, said General Davis, is how to end this. The Krex still refuse all communication attempts. They won't surrender. With respect, sir, said Max, stepping forward. The Krex don't understand why we're fighting the way we are. They expected us to destroy their worlds, kill their people. They don't understand why we only disable their ships and spare their crews. Admiral Stone nodded. They see it as weakness. May I speak, Admiral? Tom asked. When she nodded, he continued. I've completed work on the new system we discussed. Project Blackout. It can disable an entire planet's technology without harming any living being. The council members looked surprised. General Davis leaned forward. Explain, Engineer Reeves. Tom brought up technical diagrams on the screen. It's an electromagnetic pulse system, but far more targeted than anything we've had before. It can shut down any technology with a power source while leaving life support systems untouched. We could disable the entire Krex defensive grid without a single casualty. How is this possible? Asked a council member. The Krex have advanced, shielding. Tom's face darkened slightly. My sister was on a humanitarian mission to Krex space when their ships attacked her vessel 6 months ago. She was studying their technology. Before she died, she managed to send back data on their power systems. I've been working with that data ever since. There was a moment of silence for this previously unknown sacrifice. So we could end this war without further bloodshed, said Admiral Stone thoughtfully. General Davis nodded. Prepare your fleet, Admiral. We'll give the Krex one more chance to open communications. If they refuse, you are authorized to use Project Blackout and end this conflict. 3 days later, the largest human fleet ever assembled emerged from Lightspeed at the edge of the Krex home system. 250 ships, ranging from small, fast attack vessels to massive destroyers, formed up in a crescent formation. At the center was the Vengeance, Admiral Stone's flagship. On its bridge, Stone stood with Max and Tom, looking at the tactical display showing the Krex defenses. The Krex homeworld was surrounded by layers of defense stations, minefields, and over 500 warships. They've committed everything they have, said Max. There's not a single Krex ship left anywhere else in their territory. Admiral Stone nodded. Open a channel to the Krex High Command. After a moment, the main screen lit up showing High Commander Drez. His yellow eyes were hard, but there was something new in them. Uncertainty. Human, he said. You have come to our home world. Are you finally ready to fight properly instead of hiding in shadows? Admiral Stone's voice was calm. High Commander Drez, we've never been hiding. We've been showing restraint. Something you might learn from. Restraint? Drez made the clicking sound of Krex laughter, but it sounded forced. You disabled our ships instead of destroying them because you are weak. No, said Admiral Stone. We spared your people because we choose not to kill when we don't have to. Strength isn't measured by how many you can destroy, but by how much you can control your power. She stepped closer to the screen. This is your last chance, Commander. Open diplomatic channels. Return the remains of Captain Walker. Agree to respect human space. If you do these things, this war ends today. Drez's face hardened. The Creks do not surrender to lesser beings. Then you leave us no choice. Admiral Stone cut the transmission and turned to Tom. Prepare Project Blackout. Tom moved to a special console that had been installed for this purpose. System ready, Admiral. On your command. Admiral Stone looked at the tactical display one more time. Then, execute. From the Vengeance and 20 support ships, a wave of energy spread outward. It was invisible to the naked eye, but on the tactical display it appeared as an expanding blue circle. As it reached the Creks ships, their lights flickered and went out. The energy wave continued, passing through the defense stations, the orbital platforms, and finally washing over the Creks homeworld itself. Throughout the Creks system, technology shut down. Weapons went offline. Engines stopped. Communication systems fell silent. On the Creks homeworld, cities went dark. But hospitals and life support systems continued to function exactly as Tom had promised. In less than 5 minutes, the entire Creks civilization had been disconnected. Their mighty fleet drifted powerless in space. Their defense systems were silent. For the first time in their history, the Creks were completely defenseless. All ships, hold position, ordered Admiral Stone. No one fires unless fired upon. The bridge was silent as they waited. Then the communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Creks homeworld. It's not from High Command. It's from their Council of Elders. Admiral Stone raised an eyebrow. Put it through. The screen showed an old Creks with pale blue skin and wise eyes. I am Elder Kale of the Creks Council. High Commander Drez has been relieved of duty. We wish to discuss terms. Admiral Stone nodded. That would be wise. As the arrangements for meetings were, Max turned to Admiral Stone. You know, when I joined the diplomatic corps, I never thought I'd end up fighting a war. Sometimes, said Admiral Stone, you have to show your strength before others will listen to your words of peace. Outside the viewports of the Vengeance, the powerless Creks ships drifted in the darkness, a stark reminder of the human lesson. True strength lies not in the destruction you cause, but in the destruction you choose to avoid.